Hello and welcome to our video series of the QSC Power Speaker System. Today we're going to talk about the ins and outs of the speaker, go through the settings, and help you make sure you have no issues when you're out in the field. This video is fairly long with lots of information, but if you look in the description below, we've created some links for you so you can quickly navigate to any part of the video you need. First, let's cover the ins and outs of the speaker before we dive into the menu settings and get into some of the more complicated pieces of the speaker. So first, we have three inputs. So we have input 1 and 2. This is great for microphone inputs, line level inputs, such as the mixer, which would have come with this system. You can also plug things in like a bass guitar. That will probably not be something in your application you'll be using, but it can be done on this series of speaker. So for the first two, that is the case. The third input is a stereo input similar to what you find on an iPhone or any kind of MP3 player. Simply just plug it in, good to go. You've got three volume knobs here, each correlating to the three inputs. Next, you have two outputs. Each one of these correlates to the input. So if you plug into input 2, that's what comes out of this output. Same with here for input 1. There's also a mixed input. This is right here. And this is useful if you want to link multiple speakers together and use this as a mixer and just send that same feed to each one of the other speakers. Also, one thing I want to make sure, this is very confusing sometimes. This input here, this jack, is a combo jack. It accepts both XLR and 1/4 inch cables. At first glance, it does not look like they're going to fit, but I promise you they do. So make sure you just, you can see there's little notches. There's 3 notches. That aligns with the pins on an XLR, and a 1/4 inch just goes right down the center of that. Lastly, of course, we have the power connection, and then our power switch. And I guess up here we do have our LCD, some buttons to control it, and a knob for getting to the settings. So let's fire it up. And you're going to notice it takes a good 5-6 seconds before that LCD screen comes on. So if you flip it on, don't panic. It is still going to fire up unless you don't have it plugged in. Of course, double check your power settings. But initially, don't worry about that. That's pretty normal for the speaker. So next, we're going to cover the settings in the LCD screen, and we'll go through each one and talk about the details. All right, so now we're going to go into the settings of the speaker to make sure that it is set appropriately for the kind of application you'll be using it for. So let's come in. We've got it at the very first. You can just see the knob here scrolls you through presets. So let's start. The very most important thing is setting the input level first. So you'll notice here it says line for A. So if you press this is the enter button. It'll take you in. And just for some quick navigation, hit this button here. It takes you back out to get back to the screen. Nothing has changed. So let's go back in. So it's currently set to line level. If I scroll down, it asks the question, are you sure that you want to switch to mic level? The reason it's asking this is because when you switch to mic level, it increases the volume significantly. So before you do this, you want to be setting this before you have audio going to it. Otherwise, you could hurt your ears or blow up the speaker, neither of which are good. So once you select yes for the mic, you'll notice that it lights up the little mic light here as well, letting you know that you've set that input to that volume. If you're using a mixer, you do not want this set to mic level. The times you would want this set to mic level would be maybe you're not using a mixer and you just want to plug a microphone straight into this input here. That is going to be, you need that extra volume to get it up. But with a mixer, you're going to have plenty of things to get the volume at the level you need, and the speaker will be much quieter and cleaner at line level. For the sake of just setting it, we can go back to line level, press enter, and then you'll notice it says line. You can do the same for B. So if you're feeding it all into the speaker, you want them usually to be the same if you're feeding it the same kind of input. Let's go down to the next setting. So this is one of the most important ones. So this is a preset for the sound of the speaker itself. It's kind of like a custom preset EQ. Instead of you having to go in and figure what sounds best, the speaker will do it for you. So let's go in. So first we have default. and really is what I would recommend. In default, it optimizes the speaker for its basic settings and really will sound good in probably 95% of situations. So I recommend starting there and really only changing this if you feel like you need to. But there are times when you are going to need to, or you might want to. So let's go to a couple of the other presets here. So there's live and live bright. Both of these these settings are similar. The difference, of course, being one a little bit brighter, but both of them are designed for when you're like running a band through it, and it's gonna do some EQing to the speaker to help you avoid feedback problems. Continuing down, go the other way here. So dance. So this is a great setting for really playback. It's gonna enhance the low end, and it's gonna be good if you you wanna crank that speaker up and you're just playing some dance music on the floor and just having a good time. It is good. I don't recommend it, however, if you're doing voice, because it tends to cut out the frequencies where most people's voices are, and it may not sound quite as good, quite as clear. Moving down, we do have some stage monitor settings. Probably not gonna be using those scenarios. Guitar amp, bass amp, again, not common, but hand mic. So this is definitely a common one, where maybe you're doing a basic presentation and you have a microphone you've just plugged in, like a handheld, like an SM58 or something. In that scenario, this would really be a good choice. Again, it's gonna EQ the speaker to help you avoid feedback problems that you might otherwise encounter when you're using that kind of microphone, that kind of input. And then last, we have the headset mic. So again, that microphone picks up different frequencies than a handheld microphone and help you avoid feedback problems. So you'll notice most of these are set to help you kind of avoid noise issues and feedback problems, but you can also control some of that from the mixer, and if you set your mixer properly, you shouldn't have too many problems here. But if you're not using a mixer, one of these settings might really be appropriate for what you want to do. So if you want to choose one, just hit enter, and then you'll notice a little arrow goes next to it, and you got to back out. Okay. Next, let's talk about the crossover. We'll make this quick. So the crossover is when you use a subwoofer. So something generates a lot of low end. And then you don't want this speaker to generate that low end. You want the sub to do it for it. It makes this more efficient, and it'll actually make it sound better, the whole system sound better. So by default, if you're not using anything, you want it to be set to no sub. And that's how it's gonna come when we send it out with you. But if you decided to get a bigger system and you rented some powered subs from us, for example, you might wanna set that to one of these other settings. Most common, you're gonna set it to the 100 hertz setting. This is a good balance in terms of low end performance and then what's going appropriate to go to the speaker. But for most applications, you're gonna set it to no sub. Okay, you notice the little arrow moved. Next is delay. This really shouldn't be something that you have to change. It's usually something we might use in a production setting where this is a satellite speaker and we need to time align it with the main speakers. Should you be in a scenario, maybe you rented 4 speakers and you are using a couple speakers as satellites to fill further back, a really great way to set the milliseconds, which is gonna set the delay, is measure the distance between the main speaker and the satellite speaker, and then set your milliseconds appropriately. So if you hit enter, and notice you can, it's really nice. It shows you the milliseconds, feet, and meters. So however you measured that, and so I can go to, say it's roughly 7 feet. That's gonna be 65 milliseconds. Really simple to set. Most scenarios, you're not gonna do this, and it will cause issues if you don't set it back to 0. So I would recommend just leaving that at 0. Now, there's also an EQ setting. So the EQ setting is similar to the presets, except it lets you have complete control of every different frequency band, so you can customize it to your needs. Again, 99% of the time, you will not need to make any adjustments to this, but if you are comfortable with EQ settings and you know that you want to do a certain thing, you can come in and set this. It's also important to know this will set on top of the preset. So if you have a preset like dance, where it's cutting a lot of those mid frequencies, you want to make sure you don't come in and cut more. You may run into more problems as opposed to solving the problems. So it's best to leave this, again, flat or at 0 unless you feel comfortable and you know what you're wanting to accomplish there. And then last, maybe the most important, the settings. So the most important one on here, factory reset. So sometimes maybe you got the speaker off from a rental and it has some delay and it's got a weird preset and you just can't seem to figure out what's going on. I highly recommend just coming in here, hitting factory reset. It's going to ask you if you're sure. I'm going to hit yes. And it's resetting to the default settings. I recommend always starting from that, and that is usually how it's going to come if you rented it from us. It will already have been preset that way, so you're starting from scratch. But if you are running into trouble, this is a good way to kind of start fresh and make sure that some settings weren't goofing you up for some reason, or we missed something. And then it'll boot right back in, and you'll notice everything's set to line, no sub, no delay, and everything's dialed in. Now that we've covered the settings inside of the speaker, let's quickly talk about how to set the volume levels on it. My recommendation, this is your setting here for volume 1. A most common setup is going to be 2 speakers, each coming in on input 1. If you're set to line level or even mic level, a good starting place, set it straight up to 0 dB. This is going to give you some sound. You can hear what's going on, but it also won't be at max volume. That way, if something is turned up too high, you don't get a sudden burst of sound that can hurt your eardrums, blow up the speaker, that kind of a thing. From there, you can turn it up. Usually in a setting where I have a mixer running into the speaker, I tend to find myself probably running it closer to 3/4, and then I do the rest of the control on the mixer itself. And this way I have a pretty good way to control it remotely and keeping the speaker nice and clean. If you're running a mic directly into it, either of these inputs, start again at 0 and then have someone or yourself talking where it kind of will be, and then you can adjust this level right here till it sounds good. If you turn it up a little too much, you get a little bit of feedback, that's okay. Just back it off a little bit and you should be good to go. Hopefully this video was helpful and will set you up for success in your next event. If you do have any questions, please comment below. We would love to hear from you and be happy to help you with any questions you would have. In our next video, we're going to cover the radio Bluetooth box. This enables you to connect your phone or a laptop wirelessly to the system. Please click like below if you liked what you saw here today. And of course, if you want to stay in touch and know new content that we'll be uploading, hit the subscribe button as well.